What are your pronouns?
He, they.
She, they.
They, them.
Oh, there she goes.
Sex offenders, should they be allowed in women's prisons?
Come on.
There's more cisgender straight males that cause conflict in the world than transgender people.
More than 70% of transgender prisoners are in for sex offences or violent crimes.
There are more women than I am.
So erasing her own sex. Pixie ears.
Men be allowed to compete in women's sport?
Usually the differences aren't that big.
Vaping through the mask. Hi everyone, it's Jack. Welcome back to my channel, and I'm so glad to have you back here with me, or if you're new, welcome. Today, we are going to be reacting to exposing woke students' insane views on gender. I'm very curious to see what happens here. So this was posted 4 months ago, and it is at Sussex University. So we're in the UK here. And most of the, TikToks and stuff we react to are of people from the US. So it'll be very interesting to see if people in the UK have as insane ideas as people in the US. So let's go.
What are your pronouns?
She, her.
What age should someone be allowed to socially transition?
Yes, no, I'm sorry.
Oh, there she goes. You can notice she has the pink hair, which is nothing wrong with that. But if someone is stopped and then they introduce a topic, then they have every right to say, like, oh, sorry, I don't want to talk about this, especially because they know they're going to be put online. It's fine. I think, the fact that she cursed at him shows that she's not willing to debate. And that is the problem, is that most people just don't think this topic is up for debate. And I believe that the underlying factor of all that is because their arguments are far more frivolous than they understand them to be. They won't be able to argue them logically.
What are your pronouns?
She, they.
I don't actually have a clue. What does she, they mean?
I don't know, to be honest. I'm just not entirely comfortable with the she, her pronouns, but also I don't feel like asking people to call me they, them, so it's just easier.
Well, I mean, at least she's honest. Like, she says she has no idea. So you're making something a part of your identity and asking people to refer you as it, which is quite a big statement, and you can't even explain what it is. Should you not at least have some nonsensical reason why having she and they, which is non-binary but also binary, makes sense?
What age should someone be allowed to socially transition?
Any age they want.
8-year-old boy starts running around in girls' clothes, identifying as female, maybe even asked to be called Jane, for example. Is that okay?
I think so, yeah.
And what age should someone be allowed to start transitioning medically? What age should they be allowed to get surgery?
I think that should be between them and their doctor.
But what age? Would an 8-year-old be allowed to do that should an 8-year-old or 10 or even 11 or 12-year-old be allowed to do that with a doctor?
Hormonally speaking, 8-year-old boys and girls are essentially the same. I think they can put in hormone blockers to reduce the rate of puberty at that age. I don't know too much about it.
Trans women, so biological men, is that correct? Trans women being in female safe spaces.
Yeah, I'm perfectly comfortable with that.
Obviously, the lesser of the two evils is social transition, but it is known that socially transitioning can sort of embed the identity and set them on a path to eventual medicalization. Whereas in the past, a lot of these kids would have grown out of it and, they would have just ended up being gay, happy adults. She said she doesn't know much about this. So I think this is quite telling, because when I didn't know much about it, I just automatically thought, oh, well, if you're a trans child, then you deserve to get help. Otherwise, you are oppressing them. I didn't understand the intricacies and the real deep questions that need to be asked. And how does a child know this for sure? It's not the same as being gay. And in these cases, it's before their sexual development. So you can't even compare it to being gay, because being gay, that is something that doesn't really solidify till your puberty anyway. You can see she probably doesn't know there's potential side effects from puberty blockers, the fact that there are no long-term studies, that there's no evidence that these actually benefit kids. You can see that when she says, oh yeah, I'm happy with them being in women's safe spaces, she says, I'm totally comfortable with that. So there's a big difference here between I respect the fact that she is comfortable. I think if you were to ask women who have been violently abused for years by, their husbands or partners, and have to run to a women's shelter and then have PTSD when actually being around men, and they often can't be around men for a very long time until they heal, I think you'd get a very different story. And hopefully by listening to those ideas as well, we can understand that it's not about just being transphobic or not wanting to be oppressive, but it's actually about how women feel about the situation as a whole. What about religious women who can't be in close proximity to men in that way, especially when they are getting dressed and everything? So there you go.
Trans women in prisons, in female prisons, for example. Should they be allowed in female prisons?
I think so, yeah.
Why?
Because they're women.
What about the feminist argument that say that that's not true?
Well,
And that
that's not intersectional feminism. Intersectional feminism is accepting everyone, male, female, whoever, we are all equal.
So again, all the rhetoric is just trans women are women, and there's no more substance to the argument. I think she has good intentions. She just wants to be inclusive. It's not bad intentions, but there's such little thought put into all of this. People just don't understand how these are such big questions that need to be considered.
can you define what a woman is?
Person that identifies as a woman, I suppose.
A woman is whoever identifies as a woman, which doesn't give us any indication on what a woman actually is. And if a woman is just anyone who identifies as a woman, then why does anyone want to identify it? Because it doesn't really have any meaning. You know, the obvious answer is that there are women who are women, and then there are some men who, you know, somehow feel like they're a woman for various different motivations, and they wish they were biological women. So that's the real thing that we're dealing with.
You can clearly see I'm a male.
Yeah.
I hope so anyway. If I wake up tomorrow morning and want to identify as a woman, can I do that?
Yes.
And that would make me a woman.
Yes.
What are your pronouns?
She, her. She, her.
Look at her like twisting the vape around in her hand. So you can see the type of people he's stopping, because I'm pretty sure this girl has like pixie ears on. You know, all for freedom of expression. But so far we've had pixie ears and 2 people with colored hair. So he's obviously going for, you know, the look first off.
She, they.
Really? Yeah.
I personally feel that the she, they, and he, they is sort of someone who wants to put their foot in the kind of woke gender sphere and doesn't want to be completely like a cis, white, straight woman. You know, God forbid you are one of those people. But they don't really want the effort involved to correct people all the time, and how awkward it can be in those situations when you're always getting misgendered and dealing with that anxiety. So that's kind of how I feel.
I don't really care for certain like stereotypes within gender, so I can fluctuate between more masculine and feminine aspects of my personality.
Why does only identifying as she, her mean that you have to conform to female stereotypes? Why do you need the they to not conform to stereotypes? I'd be very interested to hear the answer.
What defines a woman?
I think a woman is an individual that presents themselves as a very strong and proud person, someone that is very independent.
A woman is proud and independent. So, you know, my next question to that, okay, does that mean men can't be proud and independent? And then you sort of go down that slippery slope where their arguments become more and more difficult to defend.
Do you have any thoughts on men being in public bathrooms or sports? Should that be allowed?
I mean, this debate is like, you never know where to draw the line. You never know how far it is. Like, if someone's like transitioning from male to female, but they make like no effort to transition, like they've got a beard, they don't shave their beard, they still wear boys' clothes or something. If they made no effort to transition, but they just say they're a female, then it's like, what do you think about that? It's like sometimes a little bit too open.
So I'm happy with the girl in the middle actually introducing some nuance to this conversation. I do agree, it is difficult to draw the line. I think there are obviously lots of trans women who are respectful and would cause absolutely zero issues in a bathroom. And I recognize that there are loads of women who are quote unquote progressive and would be fine with this. But then I also respect some women who just aren't comfortable with it. I think they have every right to be if they want to be. And then this girl saying, you know, it's no one's business. Well, it actually is, because if you're allowing men that, you know, like she said, have a beard and don't make any effort to transition to go into a female changing room, then it is absolutely those women's business.
There's more cisgender straight males that cause conflict in the world than transgender people. Like, I'm sorry, they are the most respectful people I've ever met in my entire life. And I have such the utmost respect and care for all my friends who are trans.
I would guess that she's referring to, when she says all my trans friends, she's probably referring to her friends that go by they, them, and she, they. I think it is still relatively rare to find people that medically transition, you know, even though we see it a lot in the media, online, it's not, you don't go around seeing, you know, every other person as a medical transitioner. But I think, you know, we talk about the different motivations towards transition, and a lot of the autogynephilic men, so men who are sexually attracted to the idea of themselves as a woman, who transition and they are heterosexual, they typically transition much later in life and they won't be in the same circles as this girl. And while most of them are also innocuous and introverted, there are a large portion now claiming to be lesbians and trying to redefine what a lesbian is. Most of the crimes or, narcissistic situations that happen, unfortunately, do come from this population and not the homosexuals or the gay type attracted to men. I think a lot of these people just have not been exposed to full other sides of the argument where you explain the science. And I don't blame them, because when I was solely in queer circles, no one ever talked about this stuff. I had zero clue. And they also have no clue. They just think being trans is as simple as being gay, and that we just need to be accepting and loving. And, I have compassion for why they think that.
So trans women, so biological men in women's spaces and prisons, for example, should that be allowed or should that not be allowed? Should they be in a male prison rather than a woman's prison?
A trans woman should never be put in a male prison. Absolutely not.
Yeah, it's really dangerous for them.
Not. They are
What,
fetishized and they
were
are
you asking about
abused.
trans women or?
Trans women
Oh.
being in a female prison.
Yeah, that's
They are-
fine.
they are
They have
women.
that in Orange is the New Black, don't they?
Yeah, they are women.
So I do agree with the first point in that in general, I don't think they should be put in with men, because we also have to think of trans people's safeguarding. Now, if there's someone who've committed a violently brutal attack, I personally feel like they've lost their privileges to not be in with men. The fact is that 99% of sexual violence are committed by men. So we can see that regardless of how someone identifies, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are just automatically of less risk than the general risk of being male. I'm male, so I'd be put in that category. I know that I would never do something like that, but I am still put in that category. So it doesn't matter how I identify. I shouldn't be put in a women's prison. But, we do feel, a lot of us, that they should be housed in their own facility. There are enough trans women in prison in the UK as a whole. There's about 150, I believe, to have at least a wing of their own facility in one area of the country. And then I think that ultimately solves the issue.
They would the amount of abuse and violence that they would face in a men's only prison. That is, it's basically just suggesting like you are not actually a woman, you are a man. They are women. Yeah. They are more women than I am.
They're more women than you are.
Yeah, 100%.
So erasing her own sex, not a particularly feminist argument to say that trans women who've gone to prison are more women than she is. People are now willing to sacrifice themselves for the sake of the quote unquote most oppressed. And we see it with gay people now happily erasing their own sexuality for the sake of this. And they don't really see it as that. I'm personally not for it.
They're biologically male and you put them in with prison. You're not just offending them. It's not just like putting them in that box. You're putting every single transitioning person into that box.
I don't agree with that by making decisions on a case-by-case basis, which is what we should be doing, that erases all of trans women identities. This is the problem, is that they're not able to debate it, because trans women are women, and then even if we have one violent criminal who's housed in a male facility, that means that equation does not add up anymore. The 1 + 1 = 3 it is no longer valid, because there's one case where we say 1 + 1 = 2.
What are your pronouns?
They, them.
So we're trying to understand at what age, for parents as well, for guidance. A 4-year-old boy starts running around in girls' clothes or starts identifying as female. Is that okay?
I guess if that's how they feel comfortable in their own skin, in their own body.
I do agree with her saying that that's whatever they feel comfortable. When it comes to their expression, I think we should allow young boys, young girls to express themselves however they want, as long as it's, decently appropriate. But it's the whole identity aspect. They're just viewing it as, just being true to them. And I don't blame them for that. But they're not viewing if you do this, then it can solidify the identity. Then they can they'll go on puberty blockers and be medicalized for life.
What if they're sex offenders? Should they be allowed in women's prisons?
I feel like...
Come on.
I'm not quite sure about that one, because obviously
It's a difficult one.
Yeah, it's a very difficult one.
I respect her for just not weighing in on trans women are women, so yes. She recognizes that she has to do more research, so that's good. Critical thinking. And if she did do more research, she would find that, unfortunately, 25% of trans women in the UK are actually in there for sexual violence. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure my statistics are correct while editing this. And actually, an article that only came out 3 days ago from The Telegraph states that more than 70% of transgender prisoners are in for sex offences or violent crimes. So these are statistics released by the Ministry of Justice. So I'm going to go under the assumption here that they are 100% correct until proven otherwise. But at least 181 of the 244 transgender inmates in the UK, which is more than 74%, are in jails for crimes including rape, forcing underage children into having sex, grievous bodily harm, and robbery. I guess the good thing here is that 144 transgender women are in male prisons, while 5 are currently imprisoned in female jails. And this includes at least one top security institution where murderers and terrorists are being detained. So honestly, what's up with that prison? Sort things out. It's not a reflection on all trans women by any means. If we believe that gender dysphoria is a mental illness, then we do see crimes like this more often in people with mental illness in general. You know, that goes for other mental illnesses as well. And for a lot of these men, the motivation behind transition does have a sexual component. They typically have a narcissistic injury. So you can kind of see why it may be higher in that case. And hopefully, if she looked into this and understood that there have been men who've harmed other women in prison, then she would probably rethink this.
About safe spaces for women.
When it comes to like bathrooms and everything, I'm completely fine with it. Say if something were to happen in the bathroom, I feel like it would happen regardless of like the gender. So like neutral bathrooms, I'm completely fine and everything with it. It's about I feel comfortable with my body as well because I'm non-binary myself. As long as it's a safe space for everyone, I see no issue in it.
I don't understand that as long as it's a safe space for everyone, like what makes it a safe space for everyone? How do we meet the bar for that? And again, it's, well, I feel comfortable and I appreciate that she feels comfortable, but what about everyone else?
I feel like that should mean there's more toilets available in the sense of gender neutral toilets.
I agree with that completely. And in the UK, I see more and more places in London, which I suppose is different than the rest of the UK being very liberal, but lots of them have a neutral option. Lots of them just have individual bathrooms. So they might have like 3 doors that lock and it's their own toilet, their own sink, and it just says gender neutral bathrooms. I think this is the way to go, personally. I think for bathrooms, changing rooms, if this is such a big issue, then we need to just have neutral changing space option. And considering, you know, how often trans women probably go into a changing room, which is not too often, hopefully they shouldn't need more than one at a time.
So would you be okay, for example, with an 8-year-old boy running around in a dress, trying to identify as a woman, expressing these, call me Jane, for example, or Sarah, for example?
That's what makes them truly happy. I think it's okay. Yeah.
I have an issue with the questioner because I think he could ask more interesting questions. And we've heard this, a boy running around in a dress, multiple times. That's one thing. When she's saying, well, if he's comfortable, she's thinking more about his expression. All of us should agree on that. The gender critical people are going too far and they're suggesting that even nonconformity in some cases should be subdued, which is antithetical to progressing on this issue, because if we allow kids to express themselves however they like, then they may not need to transition if they can be male but do all of these things.
Transitioning. What about surgery, where this leads? What about medical transitioning? Should there be an age limit on that? Or what age do you think is acceptable?
I'm not really sure. I haven't really thought about it.
Saying I don't know is one of the most intelligent answers you can give to a question, because it shows authenticity. And nowadays, all of us feel pressured to have an opinion on everything. So even if we're asked about something that we literally have no idea about, people will try and just come up with an opinion to sound like they are worldly. A lot of these issues are very big questions. So I do respect her for saying, I just don't know.
So trans woman, biological male, do they belong in a female, by what you're saying, they should go into a female prison?
I think if they fully identify as a woman, then I think that that's okay, because if they feel very uncomfortable going into a male prison, I don't think it's right for them to have to do that.
If they don't feel comfortable going into a male prison, then why can women not feel uncomfortable having them come into their prison?
It should be down to like specifics. If they have a past history of like sexual assault on women or
So it would be case by case basis. If they are a sex offender, for example, then would you say no, they go into a male prison?
It depends. I just really think you have to know a lot about the person.
They get so far, but they're just not willing to concede on points. I think that if someone's a sex offender and they've raped a woman, then why do you need to know more about that person? They're clearly exhibiting male behavior and it's a safeguarding risk. If they've done it before, then how can you say, oh, well, now that we've got to know the person, they're not a risk?
Can you define what a woman is based on what you're saying?
Women are amazing. They're powerful. They're great leaders. They're just, I feel like women just are really important in the world. They bring empathy and kindness. And
yeah, so men are none of those things. The same people that will say gender is a social construct will then say women are empathetic. A lot of the things which women biologically are.
They're just great. Yeah.
They really do. Can I be a woman?
If you wanted to, yes.
How do I do that?
It's up to you. I can't make you do anything that, you know.
If I feel it, does that make me a woman? If I identify,
you can see she's thinking, oh wait,
they're a sex offender, for example, and they identify as a woman, but they're biological male. Should they be kept separately to women?
I would think if... I mean, yeah.
The tentativeness around this debate, it's such a simple question. If they're a sex offender, should they be around women? And the obvious answer for all of them is no, but they're so scared. That would be my guess. They're so scared just to be honest about it.
What about men in women's sports? Should men be allowed to compete in women's sports?
I think I've heard evidence that, like, usually the differences aren't that big. So I'd say they should be allowed to.
I'd be very curious to know what this evidence is. Probably Judith Butler or Anne Foster Sterling saying there are 6 different sexes.
All right, guys. So Sussex University, Britain's wokest university. Or should we start calling it what it actually is, which is a Marxist state with links between the students, their spotters, and the student union, and Mickey Mouse, childish Antifa in Brighton. As soon as anyone comes on to challenge the opinion of...
So Brighton is sort of the gay capital of the UK, so I guess, or LGBT queer capital now. So I guess you can see why he went there.
These extremists.
I don't know, who are these people? Like, are they Antifa, which stands for anti-fascist, which is an American thing, but he's just walking around like trying to cover the ability of the guy to film.
They sent up a flare, and their job, as always, is to try and intimidate. Their job is to try and disrupt, and where possible, destroy. And when they can't destroy, they just stand there with their music and their speakers. They get their phones out, try and speak to other people.
Vaping through them. Bit at the end was really random, but it doesn't really add up what he's saying in comparison to the conversations he's had with people, of which they all seem to be able to have the conversation. So in general, I think the title of this is slightly misleading because I don't believe that they were all just incredibly woke. I think some of them did have nuanced answers. I think some of them were very honest when they said, I just don't know. I don't know enough about it. And in general, you can see that for those just saying, yep, they should be in women's sports. Yep, they should be in women's prisons. I don't think that they've been given all sides of the argument to a deep level. And I think that's natural when you're at university because you're so young, you're still discovering things, and most of your life is about social life and having fun. You're not necessarily spending all your time looking up these debates, and the prevailing narrative is that to be inclusive and kind, you need to have these opinions. Obviously, allowing gay people to get married and live happily and peacefully in a way that feels right for them is noble, and I agree with that. So those people would never be going online Googling, like, what are the cons to being gay and the issues being gay forces on society. And I think with that, most people would come to the conclusion that what we said before, but unfortunately with the trans debate, it is a lot more complicated. So we're seeing these two things as the same thing. They're both, classic civil rights movements, but one of them is a lot more complicated because then we have the rights of one group infringing on another, that being women. I am not entirely hopeless watching this. There we go, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please make sure you hit that subscribe button, click the notification bell so you don't miss any of my videos, and please leave a comment down below. What do you think of these student answers? Do you think they were ultra woke, or does it give you a bit of hope for the future? I hope it does. And with that said, I will see you in the next video.